Welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about Lightroom presets, and of course, I am super excited to announce my very first Lightroom preset pack. These things have been like 2 years in the making. You've seen me hint them on Instagram, and now I'm really excited to bring them to life and bring them to you guys. So I want to talk about my presets, and I want to talk about presets in general and how to get the most out of them. I have designed these into 4 categories. The first one is based on popular Instagram looks over the last year or so. The second is modern color, and these are looks that you can find in advertising and a lot of things going on in the commercial photography world. I also have monochrome, and what I'm really excited about these are not actually black and white presets. They are monochrome presets because most of you understand that black and white prints are actually in color. We don't see in black and white, and so we can replicate things like toning and paper types, whether it's warm tone or cool tone. And then finally, we have a set of presets that I am the most excited about, and I've got 4 presets that I call VC, which stands for Vintage Color. And these are based around various looks of some of my favorite photographers, people like Saul Leiter, Ernst Haas. And what I've done is, rather than try to emulate the look of film stock, what I've tried to do is emulate the look that you get off of actual prints in the end, Chrome, C prints, all your vintage favorites. So I want to look at these and break them down, and let's talk about how to get the most out of them. With the Instagram presets, we start with Caffeelicious, which is inspired by the dark brown reddish tones of coffee. We have Skin Glow, which is designed to lower the mood of your exposure and make the skin tones really warm and stand out. We have Simply Red, which is designed to accentuate the red tones in any given image. And then finally we have Blazing Sunset, which is an intensified sunset preset that works great on a variety of dramatic lighting situations. For modern color, I've got Landscape Flat, Portrait Warm, Portrait Cool, and then also a Portrait Flat. With the monochrome presets, I call these monochrome and not black and white because yes, they are monochrome, but they're not just hard black and white. They have a little bit of toning to them. We've got Still Life, Tone Shadow Lift, High Key, and Vintage Mood. And the Vintage Color presets, we begin with Paris 1984, New York 1972, New York 1982, and Buenos Aires 1954, which gives you a warm tone vintage look and feel. So let's talk about presets a little bit and how I have mine set up, because there's a couple things you might want to know to get the best out of them. So I want to start with this image, and if I apply my first preset, you're going to see them over on the left-hand side of the development panel, and of course if you mouse over, you get a little preview of what each one is going to do. But this first one, I'm going to select Caffeelicious, which is my coffee inspired preset based on the warm browns and reds of coffee. And you can see that we have changed the image, but if I look on the right-hand panel over here where I make my adjustments, well, most presets that you're probably familiar with, you're going to see these change. And if you scroll down, you're going to say, hey, Ted, what's up? There is no change, but the look changed, so what's happening? Well, there is a method to my madness, and I have designed all of these around color profiles. Now, if you look at the top of the development panel here, you're going to see a little tag that says Profile, and I can click on that and select a profile, or you can open the profile browser. So all of my presets have been designed around profiles, and the reason that I did this is twofold. First of all, you may have an image that you've already done some edits on in terms of bringing back highlights, lifting your shadows, maybe you add a little bit of dehaze, a little bit of localized contrast, saturation, whatever. And so what I don't want to do is be able to completely come in and wreck any edit you've already done. What you're going to do is simply apply the look over to what it is that you've done. If it's an image that you just brought in, this also gives you an enormous amount of flexibility in what you're able to do with the image. So if you need to bring up your shadows or decrease your contrast or increase it or whatever that is, then the sliders are all zeroed out so you kind of know where you are. You're not trying to undo something that was done in the preset, and I think that's really important. The other really cool thing, if you look right under where the the profile is selected, you're going to see an amount slider, and I've designed it with this in mind. So what you can actually do, notice that it's at 100, but that's actually 50% of the scale. I can bring this back, I can take it all the way to 0, and I can just put a little bit of the look in if you want to go for something subtle. The other cool thing, as I mentioned, the default is actually at the 50% mark. I can also increase the intensity of the preset, and you can go for something that's really high contrast and really super saturated. And by the way, in general, in any editing program, when you increase contrast, you also increase a little bit of saturation. If this is the Instagram look that you want, then it is all here for you to play with and enjoy. And of course, I also have control over everything else. If I want to decrease my contrast a little bit, lift my shadows, there we go. We got a little bit better of an exposure coming. I can bring my highlights down. Anyway, you can play with these till your heart's content. I have not added anything into the actual sliders that you would be manipulating into the preset, and I think that makes these very versatile. I'll give you another example with the modern color presets, and this is an image that was shot slightly overexposed, so I did a little bit of work to bring that back in. And so if I mouse over here, when I do my previews, it's not going to destroy any of my original edits. Now, these modern color presets are based off of trends that we've seen recently in advertising and commercial photography. They're a little bit more desaturated. They have more of a uniform color to them. I've kind of reduced a lot of the wider color spectrum that you see, and they really, are designed to portray that look. So if I select any of these like Portrait Cool, what's really nice about these is, again, having that slider. I did not destroy any of my original edits on there. They're all still in place. Another one that I want to look at are my monochrome looks, and I'm really excited about these because, like I mentioned earlier, black and white images, when we experience them in a gallery or in a museum or on a wall, they're not really black and white. There are lots of little factors that have something to do with the tonality of the image. So for instance, if you print using a warm tone paper, I've talked a lot about this with printing lately. When you're printing on a warm tone paper, it has a warmer tone, or introduces just a slight little bit of yellow tint to it. Whereas if I use a cool tone paper, they tend to move more towards the blue end of the spectrum. And of course, then you can do toning like sepia toning or selenium toning, or there's a lot of varieties there. So that's kind of what I wanted to play with these in Lightroom. And so for instance, still life is kind of my base preset that I've come up with here, but we can also do a tone shadow lift where it just lifts a little bit out of the shadows. And this is a really high contrasty image, but it does some really interesting things with the highlights in the sky. The next two, High Key and Vintage Mood, these were actually based off of some prints that I found that were definitely done with not quite exposed right negatives. And so one of them was overblown, and it was a way of rescuing the highlights. And this is one of the things that I love about black and white photography, because like Ansel called it the zone system. But if you have highlights that just go straight to white, you can tone those and bring them back a little bit. So these are kind of fun to play with too. That's the High Key preset, as well as the Vintage Mood. And finally, we have the VC or Vintage Color presets. And these I'm very proud of. I've been using these a lot in my own work. One thing I want to say before we get into this is that a lot of times when you get into presets that are emulating the look of an older color process or the look of film, one of the first things people usually do when they design that preset is they apply a tone curve that lifts the shadows and fades them out a little bit and reduces your highlights to give you the dynamic range of film. What I wanted to do was something very different. I wanted to take the color palette that you find in vintage films or vintage print processes and bring that into the digital world, because it's a look that I want to be able to apply, but I don't necessarily want to lose my dynamic range or a lot of the things that have raised the bar in image quality over the years. So I'll show you how to get those if you want. But if you go over here on the left-hand side, I'll mouse over each one. This is Paris 1984, New York 1972. I know these are very elusive names here. New York 1982, and finally Buenos Aires 1954 is the warm tone preset. So if I select, let's say Paris 1984, and I've got the color look already applied, and one thing I can do is immediately go into my tone curve here, and you can grab the shadows and bring them up and shove them off. So if you want a more faded look, you can really make this extreme if you want. You can go in that direction, but I really didn't want that initially, because I found myself with a lot of film presets that I was using having to go in and just immediately undo that every time, because it's not necessarily, I don't want the image to look that old, but I want to use the color palettes that you found on those film types and bring them up into the modern age. And so that's what these are designed to do. And of course you have the intensity slider as well, and the ability to change this preset however you like. So that is a look at my very first Lightroom preset pack. These are all compatible with Adobe Lightroom Classic, Adobe Lightroom CC. If you have a Creative Cloud account, this will also sync these presets up with your mobile devices, which is very cool because you can use them on the go. And of course, if you're using Photoshop, they will work with inside Adobe Camera Raw. So head over to theartofphotography.tv/presets. And if you want to help support the channel and get some cool presets, you can find them there. And I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.